Good evening and welcome to Cooperative Vermont. We're coming to you from VCamp Studios in Burlington on this Tuesday, February 8th, 2013, first show of the new year. And we've got an exciting show this evening. We have Eric Friedman of the River Glen ski area, the only cooperative ski slope in I think, the entire United States. So we're going to kind of dig into what that's all about. But first, we're going to jump in with a little bit of news from the Vermont cooperative movement.
Let's do it.
So first off, the sort of kind of big news: the healthcare code, the whole fiscal cliff, everything that was kind of coming up with that.
Right.
One of the things that ended up being part of the compromise was the funding for healthcare co-ops got cut. There was 3-point-something billion sort of allocated for loans for those. About half had been dispersed, and the remaining sort of got shelved by the compromise. So only half of the states that were supposed to have these co-ops started actually had them started. So it was so doing a little bit of research, turns out Vermont has one of these going, but they got the disbursement of $33,837,800 on June 22nd. So they're up and rolling. So it doesn't look like this will affect Vermont, but it could, depending on sort of if there's kind of further cutbacks. But we've been talking about maybe having someone from that project on to talk about it. So this could be an interesting context in which to do it.
Yeah, that's surprising. Of all the indecision that sort of happened in that fiscal cliff process, they managed to cut funding for health co-ops. But the other big news in Vermont cooperatives recently is that the movement to keep Burlington Telecom local is now accepting pledges. So they have a new website at keepbt, as in Burlington Telecom local.com, keepbt local. And they're now accepting pledges.
The goal is to get 1,000 pledges by February 14th, Valentine's Day. Right. I think the website went live in its final version a couple days ago, and they're up, I believe, over 100 now. So, and the goal is to get $250,000 in equity pledges, $250,000 in member loan pledges, and the member loan pledges, last time I checked, were well over 100,000. So they seem to be trucking in the right direction. But obviously the next month we'll show what sort of how much steam that has behind it. But again, yeah, if you want to get involved, keepbtlocal.com is the place to go to find that pledge form and learn more about the whole project. And I believe there will also be some meetings coming up. Don Schramm, if you check out our Facebook page, Cooperative Vermont, you can find an earlier episode where we had Don Schramm come on and kind of give more of an overview of that project if you're interested.
And the minimum, the pledge, the suggested pledge for individuals is $250, I believe, and you can pledge that amount over time as well.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, so you don't have to chunk it down all at once. And one other sort of another food co-op that's getting started, the one in Barrie, just past the halfway point for its member pledge drive. They're up to, I think, 312. Last time I checked, and their goal is 600 before they call in the pledges and get the co-op actually going. So they seem to be moving pretty quickly as well. And I believe for our next episode, actually, we'll be having one of the key organizers for that, Emily Kaminsky, on.
Great.
Along with Michael Healy of Cooperative Development Services Consulting. So that should be an interesting episode.
Nice.
And then finally, Hunger Mountain Co-op had just turned 40. They put out a little video and they had a whole celebration. So happy anniversary, and here's to another 40 for them.
And another food co-op sort of and cooperation amongst cooperatives is City Market put in their newsletter a link to Burlington Telecom accepting pledges. So that's a nice story of cooperation amongst
Yeah, they've definitely been putting the word out. It'll be interesting to see if other co-ops follow suit, like the local credit unions or anything like that. But that's definitely one of those venues where the Principle 6 could come into play.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the co-op news. But so welcome again to the show, Eric.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me.
So you're the marketing director at Mad River Glen.
I am.
And do you want to give a little background about how you sort of came to be involved in that?
Sure. I was one of the original co-op members when we first started selling shares, when Mad River Glen Co-op came into being back in 1995, and was always kind of a big skier at Mad River and really enjoyed skiing there. And naturally, when it started to go cooperative, it was sort of a natural thing to buy into it. It was something that was important in my life and to my family, and we so did that. And I made the mistake one day of making a comment to the general manager at the time and saying, I kind of think you're missing this the story on some public relations here. It's because it's a pretty cool story. Mm-hmm. And he got all upset at me and said, well, Eric, if you think you can do it any better, why don't you go do it yourself? So I started volunteering and helping out with the PR effort, and one thing led to another, and started working there during the first season of co-op ownership. And that was 17 years ago. I've been there ever since. So I guess I'm in a rut.
So how did what was the story behind the co-op ownership? How did Mad River Glen become this kind of unique kind of consumer cooperative?
Well, I think to understand how Mad River became a co-op, it really is important to understand what Mad River Glen's history is. Mm-hmm. And Mad River was started in 1948-49 season, was the first year that Mad River operated, and it was founded by a guy named Roland Palmetto, who was one of the original investors in the Stowe Lift Company in the 1930s. And in the early 40s, Roland became very disenchanted with the commercialism at Stowe in the 1940s. And he sort of figured now he must be like rolling over in his grave, But he realized that he wanted to create a place where sport and not industry was going to be the overriding concern. Mm-hmm. And he was a pilot, and he flew all over Vermont. We have this great film footage of him flying over Vermont looking for a suitable place for his ski area. And he settled on the Mad River Valley, and there was this great mountain and he wanted it to be privately owned. And he had a saying. He said that, this is in the 1940s, and you have to keep that into perspective. He said that skiing should be an outdoor adventure mm-hmm. in a natural setting, not a mountain amusement park. Mm-hmm. And for someone to say that in the 1940s, and now looking back in retrospect and seeing where the ski industry has gone, and they are in fact mountain amusement parks, mm-hmm. Mad River started out with this very different ethos to it. And he kept that going. Roland kept that going, and but when Mad River started in the 40s and 50s, it was a top shelf ski resort, mm-hmm. and it was going toe to toe with the biggies at the time. The Stowes and the Bromleys of the world, and the Mount Cranmore in New Hampshire, and these were the big ski areas. And when the single chair was built, it was state of the art, longest, fastest lift in the world, and and all the superlatives that go along with it. And you look mm-hmm. back at it at the all the news clippings and everything, and that was the story at the time. But as time went along, Mad River sort of became more of a backwater of skiing, and as the industry changed in the 60s and 70s, and with the advent of snowmaking and more grooming, Mad River kind of got left in the dust, and sort of became this backwater, and not because any other reason other than the fact that there wasn't water there. Mm-hmm. There would have been snowmaking, there would have been more development there if it could have happened, but it just didn't, and because it couldn't. Mm-hmm. And a lady named Betsy Pratt purchased the mountain in 1974, and she ran it from 1974 for the next 20 some odd years, and really was a steward of the mountain, and decided that she understood what Roland's vision for the place was, and she was more concerned about the low-keyness of the place, and the fact that it's more of a natural setting, and it wasn't all the commercialism rolled into it. Mm-hmm. And she ran it that way for 20 years. And Mad River always had this kind of legendary status because of the terrain that we have, and we still have that. And so people were there's a real tie to the place, and she decided that she wanted to sell the mountain, but she didn't want to sell to just anybody that didn't have an appreciation for it, and she felt as though the only people she could trust to sell it to were the people that had the appreciation for it, which were the skiers themselves. Mm-hmm. So she came up with about 3 different ideas of trying to come up with a vehicle to sell it to the skiers, and over the course of about 5 years, and in 1995 she's finally settled on the cooperative idea, and ended up closing, the co-op ended up closing on the mountain in the December of 1995, and that was our first ski season under co-op ownership, and like I said, that was 17 years ago, and we've been going strong ever since.
So one question I have just about that transition, was it a kind of like, how was that financed? Was it, so the members sort of all ponied up the equity? Were there member loans? Was there outside financing? Was it self-financed by the woman who sold it?
Well, Betsy wanted us to sell to, the whole idea of the co-op was Betsy Pratt's idea, and which is really remarkable in retrospect, and that we had an owner that was willing to take less money than she could have gotten on the open market for it, because she really wanted to do it. So I think if we didn't have that willing owner with the vision to do this, I don't think it ever would have happened. And she wanted $2.5 million for the place. She said we need to sell 2,000 shares at $1,500 a piece, and that was going to give us the $2.5 million plus another $500,000 of operating revenue or operating capital to work with. And it didn't happen. We were able to sell 1,000 shares, and she kept having these deadlines, and she kept trying to force people into doing it, but it just, we had a core, but we couldn't get to that 2,000 number, but she really wanted out. So she said, all right, I'll tell you what, you guys, if you get to sell 1,000 shares, I'll close, I'll finance the rest interest-free for 5 years, and you have 5 years to sell the rest of the shares. And so we needed to sell 1,667 shares to pay her off. We closed in December of 1995. We sold our 1,667th share within about 2.5 years, way in advance of the 5 years. We burned the mortgage at the co-op shareholders meeting that year, which was really cool. Almost burned the base box down too. We are now up to 2,200 shares, and we sell probably 40 or 50 shares a year. And then we have attrition because people, die and get divorced and, have financial issues, so we have to buy shares back periodically. But we net about 25 a year in new share sales and new people coming into the co-op. So it's growing, and it's a pretty neat thing. And the fact that Betsy had that vision, that we were able to, make it happen, is really a testament to the Mad River Glen community, because it's been a lot of people said we couldn't do it, and we proved a lot of people wrong.
Going from that core group of 1,000 to the 1,667, that seems like that's a significant jump. How did you guys get there?
I think a lot of it was just getting trust from people that that we could do it. And there were a lot of people that you got to keep in mind at the time. This is the mid '90s. This is when the big corporate takeover of skiing was happening. The American ski companies and the Vail Associates were buying up all these ski areas. So we were just totally swimming upstream from the conventional wisdom in the ski industry. And we're also a ski area that doesn't allow snowboarding. We don't groom a lot. We don't have we have very limited snowmaking. We fly in the face of all conventional wisdom within the ski industry. So this was just the ownership side of it was just a whole nother thing that people just had a hard time wrapping their heads around. And I think as they saw us operating it and how it was being done, and the fact that we really were asking our community how to run the ski area, and we were getting input from them and getting buy-in from them, that people were like, wow, this is a really cool thing that you guys are doing, and I want to be a part of it. And it's awesome. And where people come from and where our shareholders are, and I think a lot of people think that we're all a bunch of Vermonters, and it's not. 70% of our shareholders are from out of state.
I was actually just going to ask that, but so what is the distribution like?
We have, like I said, about 2,200 shares owned by about 1,800 individuals, and you can have multiple shares if you want. But even if you have multiple shares, you still only get one vote. Very pure in terms of our democracy at Mad River. And we don't want anyone to have any more say just because they have more money. So people buy extra shares, not because they get any extra influence, it's because they can afford to and they want to, which is pretty cool. But we, it's, I think over time it just really took a lot of people just getting the word out and figuring out that this is a pretty interesting way to run the business, and that's how it developed over time.
And so the
Oh, I'm sorry, but you asked about distribution.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
in terms of
About 30%, 35% are Vermonters. The rest come from, Boston Metro is probably 17%, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, 10 and 12% each. But all over the world, we have shareholders. And shareholders that have bought the place sight unseen. We have shareholders we had an article in the Financial Times of London, believe it or not, and 3 people bought co-op shares because of, they thought it was cool that what we were doing. We have so many people that have a connection to Mad River Glen from when they went to college, from they went to Middlebury or Dartmouth or UVM or St. Mike's, and they remember Mad River in a really fond way, and that it was a meaningful thing to them when they were in college, and they might be living elsewhere in the world, and then they heard, oh, Mad River went co-op, I got to buy a share. So we have shareholders in Hong Kong and England and Hawaii and all over the world because of whatever connection that they might have had with Vermont.
And so, like, amongst those, 1,800 odd people, do you get a sense that, well, so I guess two questions. The first is, like, in terms of the people who ski there, what percentage of sort of skiing is done by people who are members versus non-members?
Well, we call them shareholders, not
Okay.
members, and our shareholders represent probably about 30% of our revenues. 35% of our revenues are derived from our shareholders directly. That being said, it's probably a little bit more because of the fact that our shareholders bring their friends, and they're real vocal advocates, obviously, for their ski area. So they're bringing people up, and it's funny when we can see it in certain towns where we'll have a family that in Concord, Massachusetts, and all of a sudden their neighbors are skiing there, and then we start building. We look in our database and I'm like, oh no, it's like all these families from Concord, Mass. All of a sudden, and they talk it up amongst themselves and bring people in, and we sell. I think our best way of increasing the size of our shareholder base is our shareholders getting other people involved, and it's the word of mouth, and they bring people up and they realize what a unique experience it is at Mad River, because it is different and it is unique and special. And they discover it and they're like, wow, this is really cool, I want to be a part of it, and lo and behold, we sell them another share.
And so this, so that feeling, that uniqueness that you talked about, like, does that come from sort of the primarily, do you think, the physical characteristics of the place? Is there like a culture that you feel like that having this ownership structure cultivates that is different than, like, do people feel different as sort of a shareholder, having the sense of that this is my place versus it being, going to a place where it's their mountain and I'm using their mountain?
For sure. Mad River is, like I said, so special in so many ways. It's so unique in so many ways. We don't allow snowboarding. We have the last single chairlift in the lower 48 states. There isn't one in Alaska. People don't realize that, but ours is the fastest and longest. So we have the single chair. We have the co-op ownership. We have this real non-commercial atmosphere. We have the fact that it's natural snow skiing, and I think there's a whole generation of people that have grown up never skiing on natural snow, that they don't even know what it feels like. They don't even realize that there's a difference. And then they come to Mad River and like, whoa, this is really cool. And wow, you don't need a gazillion snow guns to have a viable ski area. And they think it's like a novelty. And they're amazed by the fact that we don't groom every single trail every single night to within an inch of its life, because we can't. But there's a real positive aspect to that too, and the people are, realize that it's a really different thing. And the bottom line with Mad River is, and the reason it's got this legendary status of, and it does, that people all over the world know about Mad River Glen. And I think part of it has to do with our very famous little bumper sticker here, which you've probably seen all over the place. But it's the mountain, and it's a beautiful hill. It's a gorgeous setting, but the bottom line is, ski terrain-wise, we have the best ski terrain of any ski area in New England. We just do, and the ski it if you can thing, it's certainly aimed at expert skiers, but people are realizing that it's not just for experts. It's a great family mountain, and it's a great place to bring your kids up, and people have a great appreciation for that. So all of those things come together to create kind of this sense of place the co-op is such a natural extension to it. They felt very close to the Mad River skiers always felt very close to the mountain anyway, long before the co-op. And there was that sense of community to begin with, and the co-op was such a natural extension. And Betsy was so brilliant in setting it up that way. And again, I think a lot of people thought she was nuts, but she proved everybody wrong.
So, like, what you mentioned that kind of your involvement started as you were a shareholder, and you started off as a volunteer role, and then that volunteer role sort of,
Evolved,
snowballed into your present role. But sort of what's the kind of do other people who are shareholders kind of like get involved in a more deep way beyond the skiing? Like, what does that look like?
In so many ways, and we have one shareholder that's since the inception of the co-op has been our webmaster and developed our webpage. We had Mad River had one of the first websites of any ski area in this business, and most people think of Mad River as this kind of old stodgy place, but we're leaders in that. And the Mad River Glen Cooperative has never paid a dime for our website, in terms of the development of it. And we have a pretty good website. And Wes Wright, who is a co-op shareholder, lives in Heinsberg, has been doing it as his contribution forever. We have volunteer work days where we have anywhere between 30 and 50 people show up 6-8 times a year to do work in our forest. And for cutting glades and building our regeneration zones and things like that. We have a guy named Jay Appleton who started the volunteer workday effort as a way of harnessing the energy of the people that have always been on Mad River Glen property, cutting trails in the off season. And we wanted him to do it right. And he came up with this amazing forestry management plan, which is so cutting edge and so at the forefront of sustainable forest practices. And so because of the part of the co-op's mission is to protection and preservation, we have this forester that just happens to be a shareholder that dedicates a tremendous amount of time to helping us with it. We have some great financial tools that we use and a regression analysis that we have to do our budgeting and pricing and all of that, which is the envy of a lot of my colleagues in the ski industry. And it's these co-op shareholders that went to Tuck School of Business and Middlebury College and that have given us their expertise in developing these tools that no ski area of our size has. So, and I could go on and on and on. We're in the process right now of a plan to new base area master planning process, where we're looking to the Mad River Glen's future over the next 20 to 50 years and where we're going to be going and creating a vision for it. And we have so many co-op volunteers that are involved in the finance committee and they're involved in the facilities committee, and these are people that work in the trades or they work for big construction companies and they donate their time and expertise to us. So we save so much money and we get so much great advice from people. And we do things like that, and then we also do things like painting days will come up, and we had a whole group of shareholders did this amazing effort painting our base lodge. It's, paint that lodge is $15,000-$20,000 job, and they did a tremendous job. They came in there for over one summer and spent weeks and weeks doing this, and there's not another ski area in the world where that's happening.
It seems like you guys have a great variety of ways in which shareholders can contribute, from expertise on committees to going out there and putting their time in on the trails, and certainly that helps to reinforce that bond that people feel to the place and the commitment to the ski area.
For sure, and like I said, and I think even most importantly is the fact that they bring people, they talk up the mountain and they bring people there. I mean, as a marketing director, having these 1,800 some odd salespeople out there, helping me do my job. I mean, I couldn't ask for better than that. And they're into it, and it's great. And when I go do the Boston Ski Show, for example, I have no trouble getting shareholder volunteers that live in the Boston area to come and work the booth and talk about the gospel according to Mad River Glen. And it's great. And I don't have to pay what all the other ski areas have to pay to do these kinds of things. And how our shareholders get involved in our community it never ceases to amaze me.
So like one question I have sort of about that, because different co-ops definitely have varied levels of member involvement, and think places like the food co-op in Burlington City Market, it has a lot of member workers, but so that then is incentivized by like the fact that you get a discount and something like that. But to my understanding, sort of doing that sort of member work itself is not, or a lot of that, you don't get a direct sort of obvious reward to it. So how is it that you think that so many people with so many different skills kind of get to the place where they're like, I want to contribute this, I want to make this better. Like is there a way that people sort of, when they enter and sort of come into the culture and sort of get to the point where they start offering that, or is it pretty unique to each individual?
I think it's unique to each individual. I think there's a lot of people that they just want to go skiing, which is cool. We're very happy to have, and I think that's the majority of our shareholders, that they just want to make sure that it's there. They want to make sure it's there for their kids and their grandkids, and that it's special to them, and they feel like that, that financial contribution to buy a co-op share that's their way of being involved. But there are so many people that want to get involved in so many different ways, and I think it's not so much anything that we do as management there. I think we try really hard to be welcoming as best we can, but Mad River is steeped in people's psyches. Like they love the place. That's why they bought a share, and they want to make sure, they want to do things that are going to perpetuate it for the future, and they just come up and offer, whatever it is that they can do to help out in any way. And some things we can do and some things we can't do, and obviously we don't want people out there with chainsaws and and doing things that where we have to worry about workers' comp things and things like that. And I think with the growth of the co-op and the development over the first few years, those were the sort of stumbling blocks that we had to go through to figure out what we can have our shareholders do and what we can't have them do. So it's very rewarding, and I think that it's one of those places that people have this real tie to, and that they want to get, when they get married or they have kids or whatever, they want to have weddings at Mad River. We have funerals all the time at Mad River, because people, it's a meaningful thing to them, and we feel, the management, feels like we're stewards of this place, and I almost feel like I'm like the groundskeeper at Fenway Park, or that we don't want to screw it up, because so many people are counting on us to make sure we don't screw it up. So it's a lot of responsibility from the employees' perspective, and so many of our employees are shareholders. So we sort of work for ourselves, and I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, because we feel as though there's a lot of people counting on us to not mess it up.
Oh, I think that's great that the bond of the shareholders provide such value to the organization. You mentioned earlier the website, and I think it's really interesting that you guys have sort of a traditional .com website and then a .coop website specifically aimed at the shareholders. Right. Could you maybe speak to how that sort of came about, and how you guys communicate with shareholders and
well, we have as I was talking earlier, we have a very diverse shareholder community, and we also have and geographically they're spread out all over the place. So the web is such a great way for us to keep people involved and to keep them informed. And we knew from the get-go that it was a really valuable thing and that we could really utilize it. So I think a part of the timing of when the co-op started really went along with the advent of the co-op, right, of the internet, and how that has developed over time. And we've recognized that from the get-go. And we don't password protect .coop, madriverglen.coop. We want people that are not members or not shareholders to see it. We want them to see that their involvement really has an impact on how the ski area is run. If you go to madriverglen.coop, you'll see shareholder meeting minutes, and not just shareholder meeting minutes. We'll have and they're very detailed minutes. It's not just the typical kinds of minutes that you'll see. You'll see every committee meeting minutes that's ever happened in the co-op is there since 1995. every shareholder meeting, every board of trustee meeting, and there's 10 of them a year. I mean, when you pull it up, it's just this long, long list of all these meetings.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I was
you
thinking through it earlier, and I was really impressed by the fact that you could actually see it listed who voted how in each vote in the organization. So that
we're very transparent, and I think that's one of the things that we've been able to utilize. And I think that when people really truly truly have a say in how this area is run, it's not token. Some people don't want anything to do with it, but the people that do can go to meetings, and they do, and they voice their opinions, and very heartfelt. And when the big decisions come down the pike, they show up for the meetings. The typical co-op shareholder meeting, the typical board of trustees meeting, which is 10 times a year. You'll get 30, 50 people at these meetings. And when we have the big shareholder meeting once a year in the beginning of April every year, we got 300-400 people at that thing. So we're getting a quarter of our people from all over the world descending. We do offer them free skiing that day.
That helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plus,
draining the bar at the end of the season has kind of an appeal as well.
So one other sort of thing related to that I think it would be interesting to dig into a little bit is, and a little bit more specifics, is kind of the how democracy works at Mad River Glen. Because key piece of the co-op model is that it's democratic. As you mentioned, even if there are people who own more than one share, they only get one vote. Right. So in terms of actual sort of on the ground decision making, kind of how does member input happen? How what decisions does the board of trustees feel comfortable making itself? What sorts of decisions are put to the whole membership to vote on?
Well, it's really evolved over time, and I think that's been one of the challenges of the co-op in the first few years of the co-op. I think we needed to find what worked for us, and the co-ops were not designed to run ski areas. So we're I was telling you earlier, it's we're kind of like the round peg in the square hole in a lot of ways. That we're trying to make this this co-op structure fit our purposes, and we're inventing a new way of running a ski area, because this is in the first few years it was challenging. What was up to the board and what was up to management, and it really evolved over time. And after about 5 years or so, I think we really settled in on what works, and that the co-op board of trustees, there's a 9-member board of trustees that's elected by the shareholders. Interestingly, of the 9 seats on the board, 6 of them are reserved for in-state Vermonters, and 3 of them are reserved for out-of-state, which is direct opposite of the actual makeup of the co-op. I'm not sure if this was by design or not, but I think in Betsy's mind, she wanted it that way because she wanted folks that were more local and more in touch with the mountain to have more of a say in what was going, because they were really touched by it more and more involved in it and knew what was going on. I think that's what the idea of it was. So these 9-member board of trustees hires the general manager. They're in charge of, and the general manager reports to the board, and then he's reviewed by the board. And the rest of the management team and all the employees work for the general manager. Mm-hmm. And I think in the early years there was a lot of shareholders making suggestions and complaints directly to employees, and we had to really get past that and get people educated that we can't have our shareholders going up to the line cook and saying, I don't like the size of the chocolate chip cookies this year, and that stuff happens, and and still does happen, but it's a democracy, and it's messy sometimes, but that messiness is really okay, and and it's all very well intentioned, and everyone's in it for the right reasons, but the people, but over time, the board has settled into a mode where they're really focusing on the long-term vision, long-term commitment to the mission statement of the co-op was about the protection and preservation of the unique ski experience, as well as the environment on the mountain, and looking 30, 50 years down the line, which is very forward thinking. And fortunately, we've been able to financially be successful enough that we've been able to put out a lot of the fires that were in the first few years. We were just putting fires out. that we've been able to get to the point where we can be more forward-thinking and look further down the line. And now we're to the point where the board can do that kind of a thing, looking to the future. The management's working very closely with the board to make sure that we're going according to the mission and to the vision of what we should be doing. And the co-op shareholders can go to meetings anytime they want, and they do. They can. We invite them to talk to us via email or phone calls or whatever. And trust me, they have no trouble getting on the phone to tell us what they think, which is cool. And they, like I said, they can get as involved as they want. And the elections tend to be contested. They're not slates of candidates that are thrown up there.
Is there because that was sort of the question.
There's issues. I mean, people. There were people that have lost elections because they've been been accused of being soft on snowboarding. It's pretty funny, but people really take it seriously, and it's
so
a cool thing.
I was curious if you could just maybe go in a little bit to sort of what that election process looks like, because there's a pretty big variation between their co-ops where maybe they'll put out just like a one paragraph blurb about each candidate and there's even no statements. There are others where you can.
We're very, very different.
Grandstand in front of the meeting.
No. You have to. If you want to run, you have to get a certain number of signatures from co-op shareholders. There's a certain date that you have to have, by the 1st of February, you have to declare your candidacy. We have shareholder forums where we have candidate forums where shareholders have the opportunity to ask them their opinion and what their thoughts are on things. We videotape them. They're broadcast on our website. Our meetings are also, we just started doing that, where our meetings are, people can conference call into our meetings and listen in, and actually now we're actually doing video so they can actually watch what's going on. And it's, and the election takes place at the meeting, at the shareholders meeting each year in
So
April.
Is it only people in attendance who
No,
can
no,
vote?
no. No, we send out a ballot. They can mail them in. They have to either be mailed in before a certain date or at the meeting. And the elections are, like I said, they're contested and they're taken seriously, and it's a pretty interesting way to do it.
And sort of in the sort of kind of political history of the co-op, is it tend to be sort of like, what does the turnover look like in the board? Do people sort of stay for a few years and then leave?
There's term limits. You can only have two. There's 3-year terms. There's two term limits. Every year, 2 in-state and 1 out-of-state seats comes up. If obviously sometimes there are people who are running for a second term.
Okay.
So potentially there's 3 new board members every year, and usually depends on the year, but mostly there's usually maybe 2 seats up that are actually up for election because someone's already in, and but like I said, sometimes they're contested, sometimes they're not. There's campaign buttons and everything, and they have issues. And what's cool and what's interesting too is when you have these different issues that are involved, and they've evolved over time. What's really interesting about it is that there's no hidden agendas, and people are. People might have very differing views on what they'd like to focus on or what they'd like to be involved in. Without question, all of them have the best interests of River Glen at heart, and which is it's remarkable. And you think that there would be these kind of hidden crazy agendas, but there aren't, and that's one of the things that's really gratifying is it is a very diverse group of people. Our shareholder base is very diverse, and I think we have this kind of hippity dippity kind of. It's what people think of when they think of Mad River in a lot of ways. But rest assured, we have a very diverse group of people, and it's amazing how such widely diverse groups of people can all come together for one common cause: protecting and preserving this unique, special place. And it never ceases to amaze me.
So, the organization is certainly I'm sure you have bylaws that the membership has sort of enshrined as the contract with shareholders.
Right.
How is that regulated at all? How is that like from outside the cooperative?
Well, initially in the first few years, again, this is the round peg in the square hole thing.
Right, yeah,
You know, Vermont co-op law was not written for ski areas. So there was a lot of things that we didn't quite know, and we had, there was an attorney that was very involved in Vermont co-op stuff, and we would go to him and say, you know, what can we offer in terms of discounts to our shareholders? And you know, he came back to us, you know, and said, you know, you can't go more than 10 or 15%, because if you do that, you're stretching the envelope on the law there. So that was something, again, you know, our board just didn't know. So we had to learn, you know, how to do those kinds of things. But the bylaws are pretty straightforward. There haven't been a lot of changes to them. I think they're loose enough that they, you know, gives us room to maneuver, and room to kind of, you know, evolve. And you know, the organization has truly evolved over time. And it's, you know, those bylaws are, you know, certainly a living document, and they're looked at, and you know, those are the things that the shareholders vote on, and you know, those are the kinds of things, going back to, you know, what sort of things they vote on. Anything over a certain dollar amount, I believe it's $40,000, has to be voted on by the shareholders. So it's
like capital expenditures.
right,
things
exactly.
Like
And it's not usually a big issue. And you know, when we did the single chair campaign about 5 years ago, when we did the historic restoration of the single chair, I mean, that project was the embodiment of Mad River Glen. I mean, that was, you know, that was our icon. When people thought Mad River Glen, they think the single chair, and we had to do something about it. And it took us 5 years to come to a decision on, one, what we were going to do. Whether we were going to put in a brand new single, we were going to do this restoration, we put in a double, we were looking at doing even a gondola. We got prices for everything. Some people wanted a single, then a double, single, double. They wanted to call it the dingle. But there were a lot of great conversations in the bar about that one. And you know, the shareholders came together and they decided that, you know, and 83% of them voted to do this historic restoration of the single chair. And I would argue you couldn't get 83% of our shareholders to agree that the sun is shining. Right. And they do. And you know, that was something that they came together on. And not only, so they decided to spend money, $1.8 million on a single chair that didn't have the capacity of a double chair that would have cost $1.3 million. So they wanted to spend a premium to get a lift that didn't have the capacity. And then they stepped to the plate and donated all of the money for the project with donations. $1.8 million, no debt, every dime of it came from our community.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and another ski area in the world where people are giving money to the ski area to build a lift. And you know, now we have the newest single chair, and or I should say historically restored single chair. And you know, we developed, you know, the co-op, we were able to develop these really neat relationships, like with the Preservation Trust of Vermont. They'd never been involved in the ski business, and we worked with them. We worked with the Stark Mountain Foundation, which is another nonprofit organization that helps us fulfill our mission. So people, you know, we created these vehicles for people to donate money. And again, shareholder expertise was used to make that all happen, and the connections that certain shareholders had to make these connections with these different groups that made that single chair possible, that single chair project possible. It's really remarkable.
One other question I had in terms of the kind of like 30-70-ish split between a business between, I think you mentioned like 30-70 of people who are members versus revenue from people who are not members. I know in sort of other co-ops like a food co-op, when you have non-member patronage, you know, the members generally get, if there's any sort of surplus after you know, setting things aside, you get a patronage refund, and then the profit from non-members is taxable. Right. Have you guys ever done a patronage refund?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because that, again, those first few years of the co-op was like, okay, how do we go about doing all this stuff? And
how do you even just scrape together enough money to survive?
Well, right, and not only that, but just how, you know, what to do. I mean, the bylaws clearly say that we have to offer the patronage rebate and all of that, so we have to track the spending. And in so many ways, the co-op is the best way to run a ski area. And then there's a lot of ways where it's the dumbest way to run a ski area. And the patronage rebate was a classic example of this is the dumbest way to run a ski area, because we have to track the spending of every single shareholder versus non-shareholders and all of this. So which we did, and we have mad money, and we have our own script. We're like a third world country. We like print up our own money. And the first couple of years, we were successful. We finished in the black, and I think our board of trustees at the time was like, it's important for us, because we're successful, we're doing well, we're doing a good job, we want to give them back to our shareholders. And we want them to have that opportunity to get that patronage rebate. And the nuts and bolts of it from inside the organization, it's not so easy to do. We have to calculate all of these different things, and you're going to get $3.75 back. And
there's a picture from City Market of the van just full of all of the checks that they were sending out.
So what we came up with, and what the board came up with, was we did all the calculations, and we sent out a letter to all of the shareholders, with this statement saying your patronage rebate should be, $8.47 or whatever it was. If you would like it, let us know and we'll cut you a check. And we did that for 3 years. I think we cut 2 checks. They just said, all the shareholders just said, thanks, but no thanks. Just put the money back in. Again, another really gratifying thing. I mean, it's just so, the acts of kindness towards the co-op and towards the ski area from our shareholders is just never ending. And we figured that everyone would just take their money, but no one did.
So is it the sort of thing, I guess, a few different things.
So just to answer your question, after 3 years, and our bookkeeper and our business manager were like, can we not deal with this, please, because it really is a pain in the butt. So now we don't, and the board is not feeling like they have to use the patronage rebate as a way of proving our viability. So now we don't even really offer it, and they have to go through a vote each year because that's what's in the bylaws, and they vote not to do it. So it works out okay.
So is it kind of then in terms of the cooperative piece of returning, kind of delivering a product at cost, returning the rest to the shareholders and members, is that do you see that done as kind of then primarily through the member discount that members get? That's kind of like the vehicle for that disbursement?
That's how they get it. When people express an interest in buying a co-op share, the very first thing I say to them is, do not look at this as a financial investment. And the fact is that if you're using the mountain and you have a family and you're coming up and you're using the mountain and going skiing every weekend, and you're buying season passes for 10 years, your discounts are going to pay for your investment in the co-op share. But I always tell people, do this out of wanting to help protect and preserve Mad River. That's the dividend. The dividend that you get is that 20 years from now, your kids are going to be able to ski, or your grandkids are going to be able to ski here, and it's not going to be much different than it is today. And for the vast majority of people, that's the case. And the fact is, though, they do see an investment financially if they want to, but if they really are truly using it. But it's not the driving force.
We were talking about the website before and the evolution of communication with membership, letting them, conference call into to meetings. You also mentioned that you guys do a lot of print stuff still. And what do you try to communicate to membership through that medium?
And again, just like the website, when I'm writing the newsletter, it's called the Echo newsletter, and again, the Echo was something that Roland Palmetto started back in the 50s, and had kind of gone by the wayside. And I went back in the archives and I found these, and I decided to bring it back as the Mad River Glen Echo, the voice of the Mad River Glen community, which is what it was from the beginning. And while it's certainly co-op shareholder centric, it's very all-encompassing of the entire community, and I use it not only as a way to inform the shareholders about what's going on with their mountain, but as a way of getting the Mad River Glen community generally to be aware of the fact that we are a co-op and that you can have a say in how this mountain is run. So I use it as a marketing vehicle as well. And I think it's, the people are up on the mountain that, when they're at the ski area, they like getting that tangible thing. And I think doing print is really, really important. It's expensive, and we have to weigh our costs, and and I think that we talk about it being a tough way to run a ski area, the co-op, because we do have added expenses. I think it's more expensive for us to run the co-op. We have to do a shareholder preseason brochure as well as the regular one. We have an advanced purchase requirement that every shareholder has to spend $200 each year. For most shareholders, it's money that they have to spend anyway. But we have to do a separate mailing to them as opposed to a season pass holder. So we try to make it as as useful as we can, and I look at all of our print and the website and the email communications and everything that we do as a way of building our community generally, not just as informational to the shareholders. But obviously, that's really important too. And that's evolved over time too, is what the expectations are and all of that. So it changes, and it has changed in the internet and email communications and Twitter and social media has made it so much easier to reach our community, but it's a multi-legged stool. You can't just rely on one and not the other.
So one other thing I'm kind of wondering, just sort of about the co-op is, like, how do you think it being a co-op impacts kind of the socioeconomic makeup of the people who use the mountain? Because I was looking at the sort of for buying a share. You guys have something where someone who can't pony up the whole amount all at once can pay sort of monthly installments, things like that. Do you feel like that structure kind of impacts the sort of diversity of people who use the mountain?
For sure. And it's funny, we have more than our fair share of doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. But we also have lots of ski bums and waiters and waitresses and ski shop employees and people that don't have health insurance, but darn it, they have a co-op share. That's their priority. And I always marvel at the fact that you sit on the lift line at Mad River and you listen to the conversations. People aren't talking about their 401ks and their investment properties. They're talking about how the skiing is, their trip over to Tuckerman Ravine, their trip out west or whatever. These people from such incredibly diverse backgrounds, the doctors and lawyers, very freely mingling with, these, kind of, other folks that are, waitresses and bartenders and whatever it is that, what other professions that they have. It doesn't matter. It's that connection to the mountain, and that's what brings them together. And I think the fact that we have the payment plan for co-op shares is awesome. I mean, the fact that if you put $150 down and pay $50 a month, if you want to be a member of the Mad River Glen Cooperative, you can. We make it pretty darn affordable. And you get full member benefits, full shareholder benefits from the second you put that $150 down. It's not waiting until you pay off the share. And we don't differentiate. So as long as you're in good standing, you're all good to go, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Because it is a big investment. $2,000 for a share it's not chump change. For a lot of people, some people it is. But,
are the shares transferable?
You
like
can
in family.
Yes, within the within the immediate family. And it's funny. So many people buy co-op shares for their kids or their grandkids. I sold one just today for a woman. They were getting married, and the woman got it as a gift for her husband.
Nice.
And we sell a lot of shares that way. And then people, when they stop using the mountain, they'll transfer them to their kids or their grandkids, and that keeps people involved. And then and inevitably, people do die, and people do get divorced, and people move away and stop using the mountain. And so many of them will continue to stay on as shareholders and pay $200 a year and get Mad River Glen T-shirts and stickers and all sorts of stuff that they have to spend each year, and will gladly continue doing that. But we've also created a vehicle for folks to deactivate their shares, and it's called a preservation certificate. So that if you don't want to have that, pay that $200 a year, you can turn your share into what's called a preservation certificate. You lose your voting rights and you lose your discounts, but you don't take the money out of the co-op, which for us is really important, that we don't have a run on people, of people wanting to sell their shares.
Right.
And we do have to buy them back from our shareholders. But again, they're in it for the right reasons. They don't want to pull their money out. I mean, obviously there's certain hardship cases and people do, and we do buy back shares. And we try to be really cool with that kind of thing, but we work really hard to keep the money in, and that's why people bought it. And it's pretty cool, and then if they decide that they want to reactivate their share at any time in the future, they can do that, and that preservation certificate turns back into a regular co-op share, and they're good to go.
So we've got just a couple minutes left, but any sort of final thoughts you want to leave us with about the experience of of being part of the Mad River Glen kind of co-op, and sort of things to think about for the future, or things for other co-ops to think about?
I think that if you haven't been to Mad River, you got to come check it out. I mean, and you can see there. And I was telling you earlier before interview that when you walk into the base area at Mad River Glen, there's a truly palpable difference to what the place is about, and there's a feel to it, and there's this, like I said, a sense of place that you just don't find elsewhere. And yeah, the skiing's awesome, and yeah, the terrain's amazing, and all of that. But there's that real sense of place that the co-op is just such a natural extension of it. And if you haven't been to Mad River Glen before, you should come check it out and see what it's all about. And how many people have come there for the first time, and they come up to the office and they say, I've never been here before. I can't believe I've heard all about it. I've seen the bumper sticker, and I can't believe I hadn't been here before, and I'm really into this. This is so cool. How do I buy a share? And when we get new people that have never been there and doing it on the first day that they've ever been there, there's nothing better than that. So just want to encourage people to come skiing and ski it if you can.
Awesome.
And you can.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, for taking the time to come down and come on. You've been watching Cooperative Vermont. We do the show every 2 weeks, and again, as we mentioned before, our next show will be Emily Kaminsky of the new startup food co-op in Barrie. But until then, I'm Matthew Kropp.
And I'm Eric Davis.
Good night.